you want to start by giving
Right.
your name and today's date?
Okay. Today's date, December 5th, 2006. My name is Catriona Lee Monteith. So my name is legally changed to Solaris BlueRaven. My birth date's April 20th, 1963. And I'm here to communicate some information based on a remote assault that happened to me April 2004 at 213 Mohawk Circle in Superior, Colorado. And this was done after I sent my book, Transmutation Through Ascension, to Rick Van Horn, managing editor of Modern Drummer magazine, with his permission to Neil Peart. And as soon as that was sent out, in less than a week, my home was hit with an illegal surveillance, which included phones, cell phones, computer, and also a two-way communication system, which is called an MK Assault, or a Red Helmet Project, usually an MK-related neural remote assault program.
Okay, can you just say a little bit about how you knew that this was going on? Give us something about your background.
My background is basically healing arts, psychic, and well-known doing psychic readings, what they call a multidimensional channel. Insofar as I'm very naturally telepathic, I'm a multidimensional empath, and I pick up on all sorts of frequencies and transmissions normally. So I know what my energetic field is like at a certain frequency. I was very much in tune with other frequencies connecting in, and when it was a man-made surveillance, I was very well aware that this was done by something other than a spiritual connection to universal energies. This was man-made. My background has always been extensive in readings, doing the healing work, teaching healing work, also in martial arts, and I have a very powerful electromagnetic field and ability, a very special gift that...
Could you say a little more about your martial arts?
Yeah, I'm actually a certified black belt instructor, and in Taekwondo I taught mixed martial arts in women's kickboxing, mixed self-defense with a little bit of Aikido, Jiu-Jitsu, taught with my ex-husband at that time also, Stephen John Sellers, who was also affected by this whole incident in 2004. And I have been teaching students for a good, since 98 up until 2004. I was teaching classes on the side and doing my healing work and readings, and also writing my book, and plus assisting with land surveying and other things. So I'm well versed in other areas of mysticism and scientific background.
Can you talk a little bit about your book? And you mentioned International Drummer magazine and Neil Peart. Can you just explain who Neil Peart is? And
Right. Well, Modern Drummer magazine is where I sent my book through to Rick Van Horn. Insofar as my book, it's Transmutation Through Ascension. And here's the little cover. But anyways, I designed that. I'm very proud of it.
Hold that up again, just like that. Thank you.
And it's based on ascension and all the earth changes that are happening. It talks a lot about how to spiritually assist people in their everyday life, techniques to use insofar as meditation, affirmations, and it's all about incorporating ascension energies into one's daily life. Neil Peart is obviously the drummer for Rush, and I had had correspondence with him a long, long time ago, pertaining to some of my writing that I've written to him in the past.
so just to explain who Rush are, they are a Canadian rock band, is that
That's
right?
correct.
And they've been around for, what, since mid-70s?
As far as I can
Probably-
tell, I think they're older
probably
than
early
I am.
70s,
So
yeah.
it was when I was a little girl.
So you've been a fan of Rush
Well, let's
for...
put it. I don't like to put myself as a fan or a groupie.
No,
That's
but you
not
just like their
but
music
I
and
respected their work
respected
as
them.
musicians, and I respected Neil Peart's lyrics as an artist. I respected them as beings, as people. My book was sent to him as guided, pertaining to an incident that had happened to his family, which was very tragic. And I was guided by Spirit to just send my book to him for healing purposes.
Well, what was your first connection with Rush, besides ever first hearing their music? Didn't you have some kind of a personal connection there somewhere along the line?
Right.
Can you
Way
describe
back
that?
in my early days, in the early '80s, we were talking about the one album. I there was a drum solo contest that was entered, that people entered, and the long story basically I had covered with I talked about earlier was all right, should we edit? But trying to get back to that space. It was about people referencing my poetry, my writing to Neil Peart, and basically I'd shown some of the information, some of the stuff that I write and channel to some people, and they said, well, you write like Neil Peart, you write like Neil Peart. I said, well, who is he? And they showed me that was 2112 album, and they started showing me what Rush was. And so I sent my lyrics in, just tongue-in-cheek, kind of sent them in to this drum solo contest, and it was all my poetry and a couple of things, and that's it. It was just said, read the note, and that was what it was about. And I had some correspondence back from him, and I had 3 postcards originally, and which were burned in my cauldron, but long story. But the correspondence was continuous. In other words, I would write to him, he would write back and connect back with me. But this was also connected in and with the Signals projects, which I realized that back then I was even getting interconnected with their programs, and I didn't realize it back then.
So how long ago was that you had a correspondence? When did that start?
That was in about 85, 83, right in that mid zone,
Okay.
83, 80, 45.
And then how long did that go on for?
I was connected into their energy. As far as the communication with Neil Peart, it went on into the 90s. I mean, I would write to him on and off, and he would always send me back a postcard. He would write back to me. And actually, Michael Mosbach mentioned that was something he usually doesn't do. I never saw it as anything, other than I was really pleased to communicate with him back and forth, and that's the way it went. And it was more spiritual support. I mean, it was just a nice communication. It was like a pen pal. It wasn't anything weird. So that's where the correspondence started. And that's why I felt comfortable enough to send my book to Rick Van Horn for Neil, because I had communicated with Neil Peart in the past, and it wasn't an issue, and it wasn't a negative situation.
What kind of music would you say Rush play, and what kind of lyrics? Would you say their lyrics were positive, or I know a lot of rock bands are associated with Satanism and negative lyrics, and you mentioned the word cauldron.
Right.
Can you just clarify that what you do is might be referred to as white magic? Or,
Correct.
right.
Yes.
And that Rush are, on the face of it, a positive band. They don't really have they're not a heavy metal band as such. They don't have that kind of following. They would have a more of an intellectual following. Would you say that?
I would say that they have a very esoteric background insofar as what they appear to be. Insofar as my background, it's mysticism. It's a high spiritual energy, Christ consciousness oriented, and there is no white or dark magic. But I am in light. In other words, I don't do negative things, and I'm not into dark force energies. My sense with this band has always been very radical, anti-established, but also writing about truth and justice and what's in alignment with spirit. And that's why I was really surprised when this happened to me. But I also saw the polarity insofar as his writing, Neil Peart's lyrics, and how they parallel things that go on with an MK assault, and the kind of hearing one starts to get exposed to, because it does simulate schizophrenic behavior. It can create a two-way communication system where you're constantly, in a position where you're playing chess with something, a computerized machine-based telepathy. So I understand that my sense, and knowing that he had a struggle with this, and it took over to some extent a lot more of him than probably it needed to. And I tapped into that accidentally. It wasn't something that I was trying to do. It was just something I got what they call interconnected in. And 2004 was the huge breaking point where this really happened.
Okay, so you mentioned the MK assault.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go a little further in detail with what exactly that is?
When the it's an electromagnetic field intrusion, and what happened to me, there was a flyby tagging at night in my bedroom, in my residence in Superior, 213 Mohawk Circle, in 2004, which was literally a scan and a tagging which pierces the electromagnetic field and opens a two-way broadcast communication system where you're actually communicating with somebody. There was a live person at the end of that communication system. It's not man-made, it's not a machine, it's a real human being that's opening up the channel.
You mentioned a fly-by tagging at night, and there was a Rush track called Fly By Night. Is there any connection there?
Well, I piece it all together, and some people would call me crazy, but my sense in knowing is that, yes, they do covert projects, and yes, Neil Peart is involved in these communication systems, and yes, he does do this, and there is a form of high-tech security that's a wireless communication system, which, of course, Michael Mosbach was involved in.
Can you just explain who Michael Mosbach is?
Well, Michael J. Mosbach, claims to be the security director for the band Rush, and also has his own Ashkelon Group Incorporated business. He also claimed to be, when I met him on Maui, a ghostwriter for Neil Peart.
Now, you sent your book to Neil Peart, the drummer of Rush, in 2004?
Correct. Correct.
And after that, this attack started happening to you?
Right, soon after, less than a week later, there was a surveillance.
Can you just explain a little bit about that? How
The
it happened?
surveillance was very interesting because, like I said, when they started opening the communication system, it's like hearing you're being talked to by a person, live feed. This person announced himself as Neil Elwood Peart. He announced himself as the professor. He also called himself the professor, and there would be keywords that they would use, like have energy, read energy, live versus Memorex. Insofar as they were using keywords, and he would let me know when he was there physically versus when there was a program running. The name Michael J. Mosbach also came up very clearly. Colorado Springs came up, and some other areas connected. So that was part of that communication.
Why do you think this started? Why do you think he started to communicate with you in this way after receiving your book?
My sense is to see where I was at, and actually in communication I heard some of that, to see where I was at. When I did get hit with this communication, the one thing it does do is keep you in 24/7 running this program, where you're constantly hearing chatty noise in your head, and it's communication. So when that's running and running and running, they did reference my book and they read it to me back and forth. That was part of the what I would call interrogation. There was, I slept in my clothes. I had my bags packed. They told me Neil Peart was on his way to come get me. He was, and to be outside waiting and ready. And they also mentioned something about going to Toronto, working security. This was all communication system. And like I said, I listened very clearly to what they were saying, and I documented it. As specifically as I could, and also in the disarray that it was in, because there's a lot of extra stuff that's going on at the time. But this was the whole message behind it, was their communication to get my attention, and also my sense was to show, for him to show me what the machine-based telepathy that he was exposed to was. My sense was his way of communicating this to me.
So how did you document it?
I documented it by writing it all down and journaling it. I did try to tape it on a regular tape recorder. And I wrote down the keywords, and then eventually I started putting it into emails when it became a harassment, and when I started getting my bearing a little bit better and started, trying to ground myself out a little bit better, I started to contact authorities with it.
Why do you think Neil Peart was contacting you in this way? Do you think it was malignant? Do you think it was playing around, or do you think that Neil Peart was part of a bigger conspiracy or bigger picture, like government controlled? You mentioned MK Ultra before as a government controlled mind controlling program. So why do you think you were singled out, or were you? Or,
my sense is I've seen his books. I've kind of scanned his books.
This is
Ghost
Neil Peart
Rider,
books.
correct? Ghost Rider and Masked Rider, and a lot of it has to do, if you read it after being hit with an MK assault program, you can see and decode it insofar as him on his travels using this technology in communication with others. It's quite obvious, and it's quite obvious that Michael Mosbach covers him on it on many levels. I'm sure he's done it to other women. I wouldn't be surprised, because he kind of references it in his book. With me particularly, he knew who I was. It was my sense that he wanted to open up a communication system with me to not only test me on certain levels, because this project does test you. It checks out your biorhythms. It maps your electromagnetic field. It maps your brainwave activity. Your remote viewing and psychotronics is included. So there was a lot of things that was happening to me that was a testing ground for what he does.
So this wasn't something that you were willing to participate in?
In the beginning, like I said, when I first got tagged in my bedroom at night, to me that felt like a sexual intrusion. I have to tell you, it hits all chakra centers in a very weird way. It's intrusive. It wasn't something I was bringing in myself, because before I sleep I unify my chakras and I do a special kind of affirmation when I rest. So I knew what was happening to me when I was getting tagged. Later on, when that voice communication started opening up, and that was voice to skull, and he would literally say, I have voices in my head, can you help me? And I told him clearing of entities, and then they would go into a rhythm of 1, 2, and he'd start going into like a communication. There was also a drum solo played through my field at one time, which was literally putting me in this hypnotic robotic trance. And that was a fact done, which really sparked so much machine-based telepathy and communication that I wasn't even verbally communicating to my husband. I was so engrossed in the communication system and the remote viewing that I couldn't even communicate to my husband at that time in 2004 what was happening, and that's what sparked the divorce in less than 4 months' time. It was all autopilot. Everything was just a chain reaction.
Do you want to just go back to 2004 when this started? You were happily married, I presume. Do you want to just run through what happened to your marriage and what's happened since up
Well, I
to
can tell
today's
you,
date?
the marriage itself was solid. I mean, originally my husband, Stephen John Sellers, who I was married to, we were together 7 years. Very solid marriage. We're both black belts, both martial arts instructors. He had his own business, a surveyor, and I was his field technician and drafter. We were very balanced, a very quiet, normal couple, you know, nothing weird. He wasn't much into mysticism or the esoteric side of what I am, but we balanced our relationship just fine. After this incident, like I said, it ripped away me from the relationship completely. It just tore it away. And in the communication, and if anybody gets hit with an MK Ultra, they'll know that the communication system it programs you and talks to you nonstop and puts you in a space of vulnerability to a point where I must say I was pretty much getting overrode by a lot of, I mean, it was just completely taking me over in autopilot. And a lot of the times it would say, don't sleep with him, don't go in there, you have to sleep in your healing room. It would tell me specifically what to do. And literally I was following that program, and not in a sense that it was just almost to a point where I couldn't stop disconnecting from it because it was so intrusive. It was almost putting me in a state of trauma, is the only way I can describe it. It was like being in a space of trauma nonstop. And just a barrage of a lot of communication that hits on all different directions. It's not; those are just specific words, but other things were going on as well through remote viewing and seeing.
Yeah, you mentioned seeing. I mean, do you think that Neil Peart or whoever was behind this was able to visually see you, or just to communicate audibly with you, and were you able to communicate back to them?
Absolutely, there was a two-way communication system, and yes, he was hearing and listening, and he said he was, and so was Geddy Lee for that matter. And I have a sense Alex Lifeson was also involved. So we had all three of them participating in the communication system, interacting with me one-on-one. And when I mentioned the drum solo contest, I'll cancel that out, the drum solo that was played through me, that is particularly 100% valid. And like I said, it put me in a different space of being in an altered state of consciousness and then driven by the remote computer programs.
You said all three were communicating with you.
Right.
Name the three
And
again.
And that was Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson, and Neil Peart.
And these are the three members of Rush.
Correct. And Michael Mosbach was also involved.
Do you think that Rush are completely innocent of this, and this is something else pretending to be Rush?
I check myself, and I do a check, and I do know originally that the band was involved 100%. I also sense that at some point that government was involved, and that some people at Colorado Springs and perhaps NORAD and other communications areas were also involved. I did pull some of them in because when this happened to me, I sent emails out and I contacted people and said, hey, I've been hit with this MK assault, this is my name, this is my social security number, and this is what's happened.
Can you just say who you sent emails to? Did you get any emails back?
I had cryptic responses from people. I contacted everybody from FBI to CIA to NSA to White House to the ambassadors, and the embassies in Canada, Canadian embassies, just about around the world, and contacted people in trying to get them to listen to what I had to say and tell them the truth of what happened. NSA I know has been involved in a different way. People in FBI physically talked to, I verbally talked to on the phone, and took the information but weren't really willing to move about it. Also, this is the type of information that goes beyond a classification to a point where they're not going to do a whole lot about it, but just kind of say, yeah, okay. They knew what it was, in other words, but they weren't willing to acknowledge the fact that they're doing this point blank. And it does have a lot to do with 9/11. It has to do with intrusion in someone's home and using certain surveillance equipment to do so.
How do you think Rush, or the members of Rush, got hold of this technology, if you want to call it that? And where did they get it from?
Well, my sense is Neil Peart has access to it and has had access to it from childhood. My sense is he's also been programmed quite a bit, and I suspect he's either an MK survivor or definitely has been hit with a lot of signals intelligence projects. There's no doubt in my mind.
Do you want to just describe quickly what MK Ultra is?
It's a mind control program used to, like I said, create a two-way communication system in the electromagnetic field. It is connected to a voice-to-skull communications, where anybody who's actually very psychic or sensitive, or is a channel or conduit, can be tapped into and used for programming. This type of thing is it's odorless, it's tasteless, it's hard to detect. you can connect in the electromagnetic field, use a certain band frequency, just like a radio, and then you're broadcasting a two-way communications. And when I first got here with this, I was opening myself to learning it. I mean, I literally was paying attention to every word that was being said to me to try to understand it and to communicate it, and I got very good at it, moving the pictures back and forth. I was moving pictures, remote viewing back and forth very clearly, and actually that was something that I was doing with the band members and was validated through Michael Mosbach when he came out to Maui. A lot of the visuals that were sent back and forth, and even in hearing and listening, he could validate. So I know, they know, it's all based on truth.
So you mentioned Michael Mosbach went out to Maui, which is where you lived.
Where I moved after this whole thing in 2004.
So you moved out there to kind of try to escape it?
I moved out there because in hearing he said, pick a place of your choosing where I can get to you, is what they told me.
This is Rush?
That was Neil Peart and Michael Mosbach in communication with me.
And you say Michael Mosbach came to visit you in person.
Correct.
Why did he do that?
He came to visit me only after I contacted the White House and communicated the fact that these people had done this to me, that had misused communication systems and illegal technology to intrude in my residence. And it is that point that the people from SRO Production had Michael Mosbach come out to my residence on Maui, and he came out with some of the printouts of the emails that I had sent to him. He handed me his business card and said not to contact anybody but him pertaining to these issues, and that he would help me resolve it. And he did validate the remote viewing. He talked a little bit about Philip K. Dick and talked about Blade Runner and how that was his favorite movie, referencing some of the remote type stuff that's associated with that, and was very articulate insofar as him knowing what was going on with me. He asked me what I was doing for the community, for the stuff in my head, and I told him I was training and running. And I asked him if he had a hearing like mine. He said I used to, and then he said he took Xanax, and he started going on about his communication. When I mentioned what I had heard, what Geddy Lee had told me, was I was going to go to Toronto for some security, and he said that's not what he meant immediately. And then later on I did a check on that, and I thought, well, why did he just blurt that out? So,
do you think that Rush, the members of Rush, are contacting other women in this way, or men, or anybody, or do you think they're targeting women in particular?
My sense is that I have a sense that Neil Peart has done this to a lot of women. I have a sense that he has used this for whatever agenda he has, and I'm pretty certain that even right up to, like I said, his wife Jacqueline Taylor, I know for a fact she was I don't want to say murdered, but she was, by the MK Ultra. And I also know Selena Taylor was also taken out by this project. And I did mention that to Michael Mosbach, because I know what it can do to people.
Selena Taylor?
Selena Taylor is Neil Peart's daughter, and also was supposedly killed in a car accident. But also, I know, because when I got hit with this project and when I was driving up in the mountains, when this first happened, how I almost went off the road several times because of the intrusion, because there was so much communication and so much noise. When you get hit by these projects, they try to take over everything. I mean, from motor to everything you're doing. I mean, it's like completely being invaded by a program and a communication system, and it's very difficult. I had to literally tell myself, I said, Catriona, pay attention, not to drive off the road. So when I reference that, and I also am very psychic, and even though they were trying to create a lot of chatty noise to create a smoke screen of what I was uncoding in them, I could tell psychically, I knew that these people were destroyed by these projects. And I also sense that's part of what's created this conflict with them.
Okay, so Neil Peart's wife and daughter were killed in a car accident, the same car accident?
Selena Taylor was killed in a car accident. His wife supposedly died of cancer, although he mentions it as a broken heart. But when you get tagged with these projects, it also tags the electromagnetic field. It can mess with the biorhythms and the electrical systems. And anybody who knows signals intelligence and FBI will tell you that they can surge you out, and you can, literally, your vitals can drop. So it can be the ultimate weapon for murdering someone, a lot of things. It can be used as a very bad weapon, let's put it that way.
Why do you think Neil Peart and his family were targeted in this way?
My sense is that they were exposed to this type of negative communication system for a long time. I know that when you're that high profile and you make that much money, this communication system and tagging is is something they would do for protection purposes with that kind of money. I can totally understand that aspect of it. Also, the downside of it is if you don't do what somebody wants you to do, there's a downside to them trying to use it as a weapon to harm, control, and to take away.
Do you think someone was trying to control the band because they had a large following and because they had a positive message and they were anti-establishment?
My sense is, like I said, I used to always respect their lyrics and their work. I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't some dark underground organized crime organization, probably connected to some form of government, that tried to muscle in on them, or they made a contract with, to misuse this communication system with them, or at least tag them to a point where, yeah, it manipulated their lives and pulled them into a very bad orbit. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm sure that's happened.
You mentioned that some of this communication is machine-based. It's not
Correct.
all telepathy or remote viewing. What kind of hardware is involved in? Do you know?
The hardware itself, I suspect, is some advanced computers, satellite-driven. Some of it's satellite-driven. A lot of it's some of the high-tech computer systems that you would have underground in high-tech government places. Also, with the kind of money that these people make and the investments that they have connections that extend in a large amount of areas. You know, I want to say Area 51, but it goes way beyond Area 51, some of the stuff that they have access to. So a lot of it is that. Also, they incorporate that with their concerts, because a lot of their sound people, and I've actually talked to one of their sound personnel on Maui, Jay Whitaker, who actually referenced some of the stuff they would do in target audience with sound and how weird it was. And I did mention something that I had a hearing like Neil Peart is what it's called, and he got very nervous at that time and said he didn't want to talk about this here. And you know, that was I could tell right then and there that, you know, he knew what I was talking about. So there are some things that they do that probably most people would not pick up on.
So now you're living back in Colorado. You've moved back from Maui. Can you explain what happened when Michael Mosbach visited you here in was it Broomfield?
Actually in Louisville.
Louisville, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I was temporarily renting a room in Louisville, Colorado, here, and he contacted me, instant text messaged me, and said he wanted to have a meeting with me. And we had talked in the past, and everything in past communication was based on him coming up with a resolution to what's happened to me. And he gave no indication otherwise. So
Would that be to say that you trusted him?
I did trust him, absolutely I did. I trusted him to have integrity and to do some research, and since he could confirm that I was doing the remote viewing and that I was hearing and listening to this, and it was a valid communication system, and that I had an access to something that they know was more than high tech. Yeah, I trusted him completely to be assisting me in a positive way and not creating a negative situation. When he came out here, he showed up with two other gentlemen, and they went into the house like they were just regular friends and started talking about my tattoos and wanted to have small talk. And he wound up, someone handed him an order for me, which was a temporary restraining order. And I didn't really scan it fully. I just kind of looked at it briefly, and I said, well, you're setting me up. And he said, and he didn't say anything other than that. And then he just said, well, have a nice day, and they scurried off. And as I started to make a phone call from there to ask him what this was and why, you know, what was going on with this, he used that against me in courtroom for violating a temporary restraining order. And the order itself is absolutely ridiculous and is frivolous. He made up a bunch of frivolous charges, which he said I was trespassing, and I never did. I'd never been to California. He mentioned a threatening phone call I never made, ever made a threatening phone call to him. So he had a lot of things on there that were basically he manipulated the system and got away with it and had a judge sign off on it. And from that point on, I had to go to court, and the judge completely sided in with Mosbach, lies and all, and wound up putting me in jail. And I have to go tomorrow to a hearing to resolve the violation of the temporary restraining order, which is completely illegal to begin with.
And that's why you were sent to jail, for violating a temporary restraining order, at which time you were actually making the phone call to find out what this was he had just handed you.
Correct, right. And I am not, I'm not versed in law insofar as really knowing what things are. I've never had any conflicts with the law. I have a clean record and actually worked security on Maui and had a very good record out there insofar as the work that I've done. So this whole thing was so atypical and illegal.
What kind of grounds do you think they had for getting this temporary restraining order?
The only thing he was using, from what I saw in the courtroom, were emails that I had sent to him, and even he mentioned himself that they were not threatening in any way. You know, he mentioned, Literally, they just wanted to get me into a courtroom to testify, to communicate what was happening. And even at that, when he sat there, he made a mockery of a lot of the MK stuff. And deep down, he knows I'm right, and he knows this communication system is real. He knows Neil Peart and him actually have access to it, have used it, have been using it for a long time. This is not an old technology. This is something that they have been been using for a while now. So to claim ignorance on it is just ridiculous.
Do you think you were targeted with this restraining order because you decided to find out exactly what was going on?
I believe so. I know I'm 100% right, and I'm not arrogant about it, but I know that I'm correct about the details. I know I'm correct about what it is they're doing. I know I'm correct about how his family transferred out, and I know that Carrie Nuttall, his new wife or whatever she is also part of the handler insofar as one of these people that's been assigned to cover up the crime. I didn't choose to uncode this. It just happened that way. So by doing so, I became a threat to them, threat to their high-profile entertainment industry, and telling the truth, which really ruins their credibility.
So basically they chose the wrong person to
I suspect, yeah.
target.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I tell the truth. I'm not lying. I have no reason to make this up. I have better things to do with my life than to play games and do this. I just don't do this. This isn't me. So for me to have to go through all this stuff, I did it because it's the right thing to do insofar as expressing what happened to me so I can help other people who get mislabeled. If somebody's having a certain effect in their house that they don't know what's going on and they happen to get like a schizophrenic kind of hearing, I can decipher it or help others decipher it insofar as, well, check your perimeters, check the house, check what's going on in the radius of the house, check what satellites are overhead, check and see who you've had correspondence with, whether you're government, military, or whoever, because it does make a difference. And they have taken 9/11, and like what I mentioned before, is like this electromagnetic field tagging can be used as a weapon, because once you power up into these, once they connect into this, it can be a silent weapon on any airplane. You don't need a bomb for this because they're tagging the field and they're actually amping it up through certain communication systems and satellite systems and propulsion systems that can actually blow up an airplane. And that's just that's the research that I've done, and I know is fact.
Are you saying
100%.
that a human body,
Absolutely.
once it's tagged, they can actually power that human body from a remote place so that the body itself explodes? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. And also, because it's highly electrical, it can surge out. And I know because of my, what I call internal external Merkaba from meditation and the pulse that I have, it was tagged. And that's when they started working. And when I was lucid when this happened, so I was wide awake. And it was like having a surgery from a laser beam from a satellite. It's the only way I can describe it. And it was like a ripping in my entire solar plexus and my heart center. And I actually had this validated through radionics from a woman. And because for me, I said it felt like somebody had just ripped a hole in my heart center, my heart chakra. And she said she could validate that was like this huge tear in my electromagnetic field through the radionics. So it did indeed penetrate. It did indeed cause problems. It did tear the electromagnetic field up. It did create false programs, and there was a lot of intrusion and trauma with just the programming that they're doing, because they're affecting your REM and they're mapping a lot of different things.
How long do you think this technology has been around?
Well, my sense, it's been around for some time. I mean, I'm sure that it was done, with the CIA and prior. I'm sure of it. I'm sure it's used for recruitment, what they call Al-Qaeda, which is really CIA. There's no doubt in my mind. When it comes down to the ancient technologies associated, I mean, we're all telepathic. We're all very psychic. The more work we do spiritually, the more we become a target because of the energy we bring in, and that has a lot to do with the type of energy we're capable of harnessing as beings. And also the psychic abilities. I mean, we're naturally psychic to begin with, and I know where I was at psychically. So when this happened, I mean, I could tell as soon as this happened, because it was so fast. Everything was so fast. It was like being plugged into a machine like the Matrix. And I was like, this is too easy. It was just too easy. The information, everything was moving too quick. And that's how I knew, and I actually mentioned it was a man-made communication system.
So, over the years there have been, lone killers. There's JFK, Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy that killed John Lennon. More recently there's been sole gunmen killing school kids in schools and shooting up post offices. Do you think that these people are being targeted and used to create these crimes in order to induce fear, some kind of fear into the population?
Oh, absolutely. They're Manchurian candidates. There's no doubt about it. They're being recruited. Either there's something about them that is allowing them to get tagged, but I do know that when you go into certain levels of consciousness and meditation and deep meditation, you can be intruded upon if they're happening to do a scan over your residence at that time. These people definitely, Lee Harvey Oswald is a perfect example of somebody who had no recall of what he was doing until after the fact, completely programmed. Like I said, I've mentioned there have been people who have come to me. Actually, they were sent to me by someone who did counterterrorism for CIA, for MK, and that particular being has had a lot of programming, a lot of MK assault programming, and to a point where it's almost an AI intelligence type thing. It's almost to a point where it takes out so many real memories and inserts false memories, and that's the part that I can validate. They do insert false memories, false visuals, things that are not in alignment with spirit, and things that have no validity on any dimension. It's all man-made, and it's all about trying to control and manipulate and brainwash somebody.
We keep talking about they. Do we know who they are?
Well, they, my suspect, and I have to suspect, I mean, I know it's I don't want to call it shadow government, but government underground, people who have the money to fund it. It can take on many forms, and a lot of it's entertainment, a lot of it's media. Rush somehow got involved in that. Neil Peart's involved in that for whatever security purposes, and I'm sure it has a lot to do with high-profile people being protected. But at the same time, they also have an avenue to cover up their crime by saying anything they want about someone and saying, well, this person was a fan or a groupie or this or that, and being able to cover it up, misusing the technology because they have an alibi. They have a right, so to speak, in their own distorted world of the media industry.
Do you think politicians, leaders, world leaders like George Bush, for example, are being controlled in this way?
Absolutely. And I actually contacted the White House, and this is probably, I contacted the White House, and I did tell him I had a special hearing like he does. I'm well aware that this type of security is used for high-tech government officials, and it's the best security they can have. They don't need to wear a headset. They've got voice-to-skull communications with another security over there. The thing is that you don't know who you're listening to or talking to, and when he says he hears the voice of God, well, no, it's probably the computer talking to him. That's trying to be God, but a little human behind that computer screen. So, yeah, absolutely, he is, yes.
So this technology can be used for good purposes as well as bad purposes. It can
Absolutely.
be used for, as you say, security, or it can be used to control someone.
Correct. And actually as a healer, I can tell you that I know through all the biorhythm mapping and all the things that they did to me in 2004, I had a strong connection to NASA and ASA. And my sense was, yes, you could use it for the perfect astronaut. You can use it to create miracles, cure illnesses, cure autism, cure anybody who's blind. I mean, with certain remote programs, you can assist people, but to what degree they suffer, because if it's an intrusion with a man-made program and somebody's mind control or psychological warfare, then they become the victim. World War II did come in really strong with this when this hit me in 2004, and a lot of the Nazi behavior, and actually Neil Peart referencing Nazis was also connected in. I just wanted to reference that. And that was something also that Michael Mosbach mentioned when he saw me with the R30 tour out on Maui. He mentioned the Nazis as well, and also tried to confirm that with me.
You followed Rush, the band. Do you think there's been a change in their lyrics over the years? I know in the beginning, we had songs like Closer to the Heart, really hemispheres, talking about the heart and the spirit and the balance between the two, metaphysical things. In later years, I haven't really been following their very latest stuff, but has their lyrics changed to reflect this
Right.
this technology?
I believe it's always been like signals. If you listen and look at the lyrics, there's songs called Fear. It's always pertaining to this form of communication or a form of control and manipulation based on a signals project or an intelligence project. I mean, even from the visuals, you can see there's one album cover I've referenced before where Geddy Lee's signing something and there's a guy being taken away with a straitjacket and an ambulance. I mean, there's always these little key things they do tongue-in-cheek. If you look at their closure where they say thanks to people, they'll put things tongue-in-cheek in there. Conniption was a key word they used with me, interconnected. It was on their album. The last album they did right after they hit me with this program, so I knew it was all connected in. There was the Vapor Trails is the one that actually really references what happened to Neil Peart, which is almost a parallel of what happened to me in 2004, where he went on his ghost ride and started riding around America, listening and hearing to the voices in his head, which is exactly what happened to me, except I was thwarted out over to Maui, driving in figure eights. But that was the same concept of it. And Michael Mosbach also being the editor of that book, which I found very interesting, and Carrie Nuttall also being involved in it. And both were like handlers, because I can validate their behavior 100%.
Do you happen to know what Michael Mosbach's background is? You say he's in security for rough.
He claims to be, and also he claims to have a degree in philosophy, which I find very odd because most people who are philosophical would never lie in a court of law. The fact that he committed perjury in front of a judge told me a lot. It told me that he was willing to lie about that. He's willing to lie about how Neil Peart's family, was terminated or their lives were gone. Also, what even happened to Neil Peart in 2004, or not 2004, rather, when the vapor trails and all of that transpired. I mean, a lot of these things were shoved under the carpet, and most people don't know about it.
But do you think Michael Mosbach might have other connections with government?
I suspect. My sense is he claims to say he has connections to Secret Service and things like this. With that type of a band, when you're traveling around the world, I suspect you have certain connections to government agencies. And he can pull strings, he can pay off people, and it was obvious to me he did it here in Colorado and Boulder.
Is he American or Canadian?
I'm not quite certain. I believe he's from California.
Do you think he has a military background?
It's possible. I'm not sure.
You don't know?
Not offhand. I suspect he's got a police or some kind of a background in law enforcement. He strikes me as obviously someone who has that background. Also, Neil Peart seems to have taken him under his wing on some level.
You might think if he's in security, he might have had some kind of military, maybe even special forces background, that
Right.
he would have gotten hold of this technology, or maybe an agent of some kind.
That, I suspect, probably has more than one connection to certain agencies connected to that. There's no doubt. But at the same time, when I met him in person, he didn't even appear to be like the same man I met on Maui. His hair color was different, just completely different type of person. And it was almost as if he had makeup on when I saw him up here on Maui, in Boulder, which was very interesting. But my sense is he's connected to some sort of underground. And also Neil Peart as well. I mean, this is what they have to have certain forms of security. I understand that for what they do, but I tapped into something that they brought me into and uncoded it to such an extent that I feel it threatened them.
So insofar as this intrusion that's been ongoing now for more than 2 years, where do things stand today with you in terms of what's still happening of these?
Well, what's still happening is, I can tell you the chain reaction, of course, from 2004 was the divorce, bankruptcy, literally losing my job recently because of what they said was a nose pierce, but what I know was connected to Michael Mosbach and the temporary restraining order. Insofar as what's happened to me, I'm still repairing my electromagnetic field. And so far as my abilities go, there's been a lot of programs that are there that I know that have been inserted that would probably take somebody who I trust 100% to, not a psychotherapist or a psychologist, but somebody to really work with me on a very deep level to basically delete some of these faulty programs that they've inserted, because I'm pretty sure that they loaded me up with a lot of stuff.
Can you speak a little more about that, more specifically?
The programs themselves, I remember the visuals. In the beginning, I remember a lot of visuals. I saw things from car crashes. I saw things from, some things were almost gravestones, names I couldn't really detect. A lot of things were visuals of people back and forth, moving pictures back and forth. The energy, the biorhythm mapping, the remote viewing. There were certain images which were very machine-based, where it was like tunnels of machines, and then I would see virtual type people, almost military personnel in certain rooms, and gunfire. I mean, literally. And then I would get like a bang in my head. There was a lot of clairaudient stuff going on.
This is a bit like watching a video game.
It's like being completely what they call interconnected, and actually that was a key word that Neil Peart used. He would say, I am interconnecting in your world, you are interconnected in my world, we are interconnecting in our world, and they go 1, 2, 3, and then they start this thing going on. So it was all part of that. And it was really pulling, like I said, it had completely entranced me and pulled me into a space. Because of the meditation and the work that I've done, it was so easy to be in that space all the time anyway. So this just kind of tagged right in and then created these visuals. So the remote viewing is also still something I'm dealing with insofar as the way I see things, because certain colors and keywords and things still click when I go out in public. There were certain things that they trained me for, almost like a remote fighter pilot. Planes were a big thing. Colors were a huge thing. Numbers, certain things that they would pick and choose around me in my surroundings. So if I didn't know better, I would have said they were trying to recruit me for something. the fact that it was abusive is why I called them on the carpet, because all of a sudden it became like an abusive thing, and was not appropriate. So I did start, communicating that, and this is what transpired since. So, but I'm still recovering and transcending.
But still, in terms of hearing voices, still, do you still have the voice communication?
I still have a communication. It's not as intense. It's quieter, but it's still there. And there's still some programs that are running, and I can tell I don't sleep at night. I don't sleep like most people do. I don't have dreams. I have moving, I don't want to say moving pictures, but they're just like programs. I call them programs because they're not dreams. I don't bring in lucid visuals like I used to, and I know the difference. It's more like just like a jamming. It's just like a constant jamming of communication. So it's very different. And like I said, there's stuff that goes on with my fields where I have my own pulse of energy that I know they've used it, and the only way I can describe it is like when you see a computer screen and there's music dancing to it. It's that same concept as what they've done. When they did the flyby, instead of the way I constantly run my energy where I'm in control of how it runs, they tagged it to a point where they could create this little bouncing image on their own screen. And that's the only way I can describe it. And if it were to be viewed by somebody who had the equipment, you would be able to see it. I'm sure of it. There's no doubt in my mind. And it's still to this day, radios and things like that will do it, and I can still feel it bouncing around. So I am tagged. There's no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind.
So right now, do you think it's more machine-based rather than Neil Peart actually directly?
Right. Well, they call it
contacting you?
right. They call it Live or Memorex, and yeah, absolutely. It was originally them starting the program. He initially did the programming, and after that, something else took over, and the communication was still running and became more and more abusive. And Michael Mosbach was definitely involved. And so these people, it was right for me to pursue the targets insofar as the people that were responsible, because I knew it was them. Regardless of military getting involved later on, I know the original people that did this. So, and they were the original people that did it.
So you said the military were involved?
My sense was, I pretty much felt that, and also the FBI in Denver was definitely interconnected and connected in, probably because of the risk factor. When they had me so programmed, there were other people that got involved. And like I said, I can remember there were times when my husband would actually look at me and he'd grab me, and I wouldn't even be looking at him. I would just be like in almost a trance-like state, and he remembers that.
So if you hadn't resisted this, what do you think would have happened to you?
If I hadn't resisted.
Well, you resisted or emailed back and said, what the hell's going on here?
I don't see how anybody could not respond to what would happen. I know for me it was harassment. This is worse than any harassment anyone can do.
But an ordinary person, not one who's as psychic as you are, or do you think you picked this up because you are psychic, or do
Absolutely,
you think...
yeah.
So,
my antenna did, absolutely.
But you obviously fought back.
I did fight back. At first I was because it's my nature to be loving and sweet and open-hearted, I brought the energy in. I was laughing about it at first. We were moving pictures back and forth, and I was joking around with the communication system. I said, this is man-made, and I was just completely lighthearted with it. When it became more and more abusive, that's when I said, no, wait a minute, this is not right. And then I approached it, and then I started contacting these people and started communicating with them. From Rick Van Horn to SRO Production to anybody I could get a hold of with the band, to tell them that this is not appropriate.
But there must be a lot of people who have been targeted like this who are psychic. A lot of people are psychic and don't really realise it. Who wouldn't have known what this was. But just because you did know what it was and started to question it, it makes me wonder what would have happened to you if you hadn't have done that. If you just let it carry on.
If I hadn't, I can tell you the one thing about it, it's very negative. In other words, it kept trying to, even for example, when I do my affirmations in my unified chakra, when I do my invocations, whatever I do, it would start to try to reword and intrude everything I'd say, to a point where I had to verbally say it. And even at then, it was so intense, it would try to even re-verbalize my words. It got to the point where it would try to attach itself onto the way I communicated. And you could say this is a walk-in, this is this kind of a channel. There's a difference between a medium and a multidimensional channel. A medium is when they open up a channel and create you become the medium for them, and communication. So I know the difference between what they do insofar as communication systems, which are man-made, versus spiritual, naturally powerful psychics. And usually when we channel our higher selves or multidimensional ascended energies, it's not that kind of verbal. There's clairaudient, but not like this. It's a verbal communication that is man-made. You're talking to another human. You're not talking to a spirit or a ghost, which is something, again, that they've tried to re-simulate. It reminds me a little bit of Terminator because they can mimic voice patterns very well.
So, okay, so you could have ended up in their control. You could have may have committed a crime or
I believe
shoot up a
that-
school or something. Or
Well, yeah,
you know,
it's
that
a
kind of
Manchurian
thing.
candidate thing. When I say Al Qaeda recruitment, this is exactly what they're talking about. Or, Al Qaeda is CIA. It's connected to CIA. So when we're talking about an agency that's trying to recruit people for undercover work, I don't have a problem being certain things, but when it becomes abusive and I know it's a negative, I won't be a participant with it, and I won't let my mind get overrode or controlled by false realities. And I knew what they were showing me. It was so false. It's so intrusive to one's spiritual design that it becomes a violation of one's spiritual and civil rights. It's completely intrusive to a point where it's an illegal crime against one's body. And a lot of sci-fis we've talked about are written like that, like Philip K. Dick and some other things, 1984, THX 1138,
Yeah, which leads me to ask this question. Do you think this is a prelude to a means to control the mass population?
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. And they're easily lulled into it already. And this is why I felt it was so strongly about, opening this up insofar as communicating it to people and educating them insofar as what this is so they don't get totally consumed by it, because it will destroy their lives. It may pretend to be your friend, but it's truly not your friend. There's an agenda behind it. And if you just want to give your life away and become a drone, well, that's pretty much what it wants. Insofar as what I've seen and experienced with it, it takes away a lot of your spiritual freedom and your energy.
There's no track in an early Rush album called Temples of Syrinx, is it?
Right, yeah, Priest of Sirius.
When
Yeah, you're right.
he finds a lute or something, starts playing it, and he's told you can't listen to the music, you can't play music, and the whole track ends with we have assumed control, we have
Right,
assumed
absolutely.
control.
And actually that was
yeah.
mentioned when I was hit in 2004. There was a lot of that verbiage going on. But also...
It's 2112, isn't it?
It is
That's the track,
2112, and that
yeah.
was very prominent also in the communication system with these people. I do sense that they have fallen victim to it and pulled me into it for some reason or another, and I decoded it for them. But at some cost, now I'm the one getting persecuted. And there is one song called Witch Hunt, which really kind of reminds me of what's happening right now. So yeah, I'm really kind of amazed at the spiral this has gone and the direction this whole thing has gone.
Can you say a couple more words about signals intelligence?
Yeah, it's signals intelligence is connected to NSA, CIA technology. It's based on surveillance. It's based on using mind control and certain techniques in mind control to get someone in a state of an altered base of consciousness so they can create programs. They used to experiment a lot with psychics. Sometimes they used to use drugs, but nowadays they have more advanced technology. So with me, I didn't need any drugs. They just literally mapped my electromagnetic field and started running a program and communication. They opened up a two-way communication system, and I was open to it and receiving and transmitting with the information. So it wasn't... for me, it was like just right there. I didn't have to go through a program someplace out of state somewhere for it to happen to me.
So if someone is watching this video of you listening to the things you're saying and they want to pursue this topic in an investigative sense, what would you say to them in terms of how to proceed?
In investigating it, I would say check to see if it's affected them personally. They would have to do the research. Look up MK Ultra, start researching MK Ultra, what the effects are, and also Red Helmet projects. And I am working on a book which actually pertains to a lot of this information, which I have it broken down to a science insofar as what's happened to me. I can tell you how they map electromagnetic fields on people who are dying, and I witnessed it in this assault. And I know what they've done, and I know how they try to map the field as one transfers out, and then they try to use the voice pattern in communication and pretend it's a distant relative. That's just an example. So I have a lot of information on it. My sense was, like I said, just do the research on the MK Ultra assault, and also to open up some sort of a network where we can all communicate and be supportive of each other, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who have been hit with these projects that aren't getting supported, that aren't, and the people know that they're right. People know that they've been hit by these, but they're getting discounted and discredited because they're wanting to cover it up. And all these people are suffering from day to day. They'll get medicated, they'll get electroshock. People who are geniuses, they'll get taken away against their will. They've made it very easy for me to get taken away any place, anywhere, anytime right now with this order. And this is part of this new world agenda. I'm sure of it. So it all has to do with the truth. How is the truth? Well, the truth is power now, and knowledge is power. These people don't want that out there. They have a hard time with that because they've had all these false realities flowing for so long.
You just mentioned your book. I was going to ask a question about that. What's the book called, and how
The new
far
book?
along? The new book. Sorry.
I started writing it, and then I kept getting intruded upon on Maui. But I've titled it Area 52. Although I may have to change the title because there's a sci-fi that's all aligned with Area 52. But we had talked Area 52 and me sounds about right. So it's basically about a lot of different, black ops projects, and also my experience being exposed and hit with these things and the interaction that I've had.
You mentioned earlier you contacted various government agencies, the White House, FBI. Have you also contacted people who investigate this kind of things? I was thinking about the kind of people who are interviewed on Coast to Coast, for example. Who have you contacted?
I've contacted everybody I can think of. Coast to Coast, everybody on Coast to Coast. I've contacted David Icke. I've contacted. Sorry about that. Sorry. I apologize. I've contacted anybody I can think of. Was it Jim Mars? I've contacted many people in media. And my sense is a lot of people don't want to touch it. They're afraid of lawsuits. They're afraid of the repercussions. Even my lawyer, who was concerned about retaliation, and even was concerned. And I could probably talk a little bit about him, but literally somebody who has NSA contacts and says, "Hey, I'm out of that now. I don't want to get involved in it," and that kind of thing, where it makes me wonder, why everybody's kind of scurrying away and backing away from this, and I'm still here. So.
So basically, nobody has really contacted you back. You've talked to this lawyer. You don't have to mention his name, but do you want to mention what he's told you?
Well, he's I can tell you a little bit about his background. He used to work at NSA. He used to work signals intelligence, and he used to work for the Cuban aspects. He was offered China and Russia, and he didn't want that part. But he has looked at what I have and has validated that, yes, this is definitely a credible lawsuit, and it's definitely worth, insofar as criminal action goes, the right people involved, insofar as is getting the people that are responsible for misusing this surveillance exposed. That's the bottom line.
What have you personally done to combat this intrusion?
Well, I've used the Vibe machine, and I have to actually say that it works very well for electromagnetic field protection and shielding and repair. It's been very helpful. I'm staying spiritual insofar as keeping myself clear as best I can. The affirmations and things that I normally do, it's kind of like a rebuilding process. I have to kind of not necessarily relearn, but bring back some of the stuff that was scattered or separated from me. And what I call it, like spatial splitting, I call it atomic acceleration, because that's how it felt when I first got hit with this project. It was like being in an acceleration, particle accelerator. It's the only way I can explain it.
Do you think this will ever stop for you?
I guess I have to ask Neil Peart that. And I actually asked Michael Mosbach that on Maui. I said, will this go away? When does this go away? And he goes, he said, do you want it to, or something like that? He made a comment to me. I'm not quite certain how it works, other than the fact that I'm willing to transcend everything that's happened to me and use certain frequencies, such as radionics, and other frequencies and devices to transcend and reprogram and remove some of the false programs, and do the best I can to keep it on a higher frequency, so I'm not getting pulled into being controlled by someone or something, behind a curtain somewhere. That's the most important thing, is not become a remote for these people. I mean, there's a difference between remote viewing and being a remote, to a point where they're literally pulling you around like a little puppet, and that does not work.
Are you able to remote view them back? Not using their technology, but just remote viewing?
I have gotten a lot of pictures back and forth. We've moved pictures back and forth, and if I go into certain spaces, I can remote view many areas and see many people. Sometimes the projection comes from them to a point where they try to block me, so I'm not quite certain. It's as if I've got somebody on the other end creating a visual ahead of time for me. So in other words, when my intent goes in one direction, it'll come in something else. But they do that sometimes for a distraction. In the beginning, it was one-on-one, nonstop. And I did have the visuals of the right people. And actually, one of my witnesses, Karen Bergman, she actually was so interconnected in my energy, so spiritually connected, that she saw men and described them, which were indeed members of the band, with goatees, and saw them in visual.
Have
And
you done that? Have you? Because I know remote viewing, the remote viewer draws what they
Right.
see. Are you actually visualizing, like
I
a
can,
video?
right, I can see it just like a video camera, just like a remote communications back and forth. I see the visuals. I have done the drawing. It comes out either in writing, drawing, and like I said, and it's different if you know who's communicating with you. But I've got somebody at the other end of the communication system, and that's the difference.
So are they able to view you in the same way?
I'm sure of it. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. That's what makes it such an intrusion, because
Yeah.
I have so much going on, not only verbally, but they're in your bathroom, they're in your mirror, they're,
Like
they're
a
everywhere
peeping
you
Tom,
are.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Really.
absolutely. It's basically, it's worse than that.
Yeah,
I mean, you have
yeah.
no privacy.
You have no- yeah.
Life, and so
Right.
yeah, I could be famous over this, or I could be president because I have no privacy whatsoever.
So is there anything that you'd like to say in summing
Summing
this
up.
up?
Well, I appreciate your time and energy, and I have to trust the universe and trust spirit that all of this will resolve itself and transcend at a higher level. And I just wanted to put this out here as a time capsule beyond time, so that people would know what I had to say, based on 100% truth and accuracy, that this did indeed happen and this is for real, even though it can sound very bizarre to people who don't understand what I'm communicating with. And the best way to understand something like this is to actually have participated with it, or been involved in it. And I realize most people have not had that opportunity, and I don't wish it on anybody, believe me. But it is for real, and it did transpire, and these are the people that were involved, the members of Rush. And hopefully this will all transcend in a higher level of spirit and benefit all on the planet. Thank you.